but that currency reset is still out there. There's no real way to avoid us having to do something with the global monetary system. But as bold as Trump has been lately, it wouldn't be that big of a surprise for him to just get up one day and say, all right, time for a gold standard or something, some other kind of monetary system that is sustainable going forward.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for May 12th through May 19th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature backdated 1-ounce gold American Eagles at just $89.99 over spot per ounce. 1-ounce 2025 silver American Eagles are just $4.99 over spot. Next, we have 10-ounce silver Royal Mint coins at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. The 10-ounce Britannia, 10-ounce Royal Arms, 10-ounce Little John, and 10-ounce Merlin are all 4.9s fine. And we have a very limited quantity. Again, they're just $2.99 over spot per ounce while supplies last. Next, backdated 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are only $69.99 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend John Rubino from rubino.substack.com. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey Elijah, I think we have a few things to talk about.
Definitely. There's a lot on in my notes here of things we'd like to talk about. First, I guess the political changes happening around the world and the deals being made. You mentioned before we hit recording how really Trump's first term and Trump's second term is turning out to be quite different, and that he learned a lot in that 4-year interim there. Your perspective on the deals he's making around the world and how this could all affect the economy. I know a lot of the stock market kind of was shocked at first with all the tariffs, but now it seems like there might be a recovery happening. Your perspective where we are.
Well, yeah, Trump's first term, in retrospect, based on what we're seeing now, his first term was very uneventful. Really not that much happened other than he named 3 Supreme Court justices, which is very consequential. But beyond that, he was hamstrung first time around, hamstrung by the fact that he didn't know anything about government. And he basically just named a bunch of swamp creatures to run his departments and advise him. And they basically told him just business as usual. And he was hamstrung also by the Trump-Russia collusion hoax, which tied him up effectively tied him up in court for the first couple of years of his administration. And then the pandemic hit, so he really never had an actual Trump term. And then when he got voted out of office, he had 4 years to think about what he would have done and to talk to people and get advice and everything. And so he has totally hit the ground running this time around. And now, as we're talking, he's over in the Middle East just doing deals with everybody in sight. And they're falling in love with him over there because he just did a speech where he said, listen, you guys are I'll grossly paraphrase here. He says, you guys are doing fine on your own, and the nation builders and the neocons in the West should have never been involved with you. We never should have messed with you the way we did. We should have let you chart your own course, and now you're doing that, and look how great everything is. And so they loved hearing that. So he's doing massive deals, close to $1 trillion deals with Saudi Arabia and UAE, and he's talking about doing deals with Iran, which avoid the whole World War III scenario in the Middle East. So this is all really encouraging stuff, and it's fun to see this guy who just loves doing stuff like this, going around and cutting big deals with people, actually get to do what makes him happy at the same time he's helping the world. So far, anything could happen going forward, but so far so good with Trump. He's accomplishing a lot of stuff in a very short amount of time. And, most of what he's getting done is by and large good. The border is closed, and RFK Jr. is doing a lot of really interesting things with the public health system Trump's doing a lot of geopolitical things that are, so far very encouraging. So, I give him an A- right now. And the minus is because there's a lot of chaos that's gone along with the things he's done right. But the things that he's done right so far have been very important and very consequential.
And what do you anticipate the economic ramifications of all of this is? Because I know just, a month ago or so, we were seeing the stock market in chaos, right? A meltdown in the price. And now we're seeing this rebound. It seems like, as you mentioned, there's a lot of chaos around here. Do you anticipate the economy continuing to struggle and possibly inflation because of these tariffs, or what do you anticipate will be the result of all these deal making around the world?
Well, there's a couple of big currents out there, and they're kind of cross currents. They're pointing in different directions because on the one hand, we already baked a financial crisis into the cake by borrowing insane amounts of money over the last 30 or 40 years. So there's no way we get pain-free from here to healthy organic growth that's sustainable going forward. There has to be a lot of pain. There have to be financial crises just because of all this debt. So that's there. And then the tariff thing was really chaotic at first, but it looks like countries are lining up to do a basic framework deal where everybody cuts their tariffs down to some low level, and then they negotiate away a lot of the non-tariff trade barriers that exist right now. So we end up with an almost free trade world, it looks like, because Trump is willing to to go nuclear from the point of view of trade policy. And countries are doing a deal with Trump as the lesser of two evils right now, because the U.S. is the world's biggest market. So Trump has massive leverage when it comes to a trade war with basically anybody. So the deals seem like they're about to start getting done. There was one with the UK just lately here, and China and the US, at least the US is saying that they're making progress and they can see the outline of a deal in the not too distant future. So when stuff like that starts happening, that's a stabilizer for the global economy. If we get past these trade wars and enter a time when our trade relationships are mostly understandable and not too brutal for anybody. So, trade is a doable thing. That's good. And so that leaving aside the big financial crisis that's coming that we can't avoid, we're making progress on the geopolitical / trade side. So I don't know which of those things dominates in the year ahead. It could be that interest rates on everybody's debt, they're high enough now to cause debt service costs to be debilitating going forward. Like the U.S., we're at $1.5 trillion, right, of interest on the government's debt alone, let alone student loans and credit cards, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all recessionary. So it wouldn't be a surprise if we still do have a recession in the second half of this year. But that's normal. Recessions are normal. And if we can keep it from metastasizing into something much bigger that necessitates that currency reset, then things won't seem historically crazy. It'll be stuff that is familiar to everybody. But that currency reset is still out there. There's no real way to avoid us having to do something with the global monetary system. But as bold as Trump has been lately, it wouldn't be that big of a surprise for him to just get up one day and say, all right, time for a gold standard or something, some other kind of monetary system that is sustainable going forward. So it could be that the way all these other things are happening kind of on internet time right now, where we do things that used to take years and weeks, maybe the currency reset happens in the same way. We'll have to see. Anyhow, I'm throwing out a lot of possibilities here. And the reason for that is that there's no way to know how this plays out in the short run, because all of this stuff is, in one sense, historically unprecedented. And in another sense, it's not clear whether it's deflationary or inflationary. Tariffs, they raise the price of things in the short run, but if they slow down economic activity, then that's deflationary. We can't know how all this stuff plays out. So what I'm doing with my own money is just focusing on the stuff that's baked in the cake. We got to have a financial crisis. The big currencies of the world have to be inflated away in order to prevent something much more serious in the moment from happening. And so that's got to happen. So invest for something like that, which is, say, gold and silver and other related equities that tend to do well in an inflationary period. And then just recognize that, the rest of this stuff is just unpredictable. We can't say how it's going to go, certainly not in the short run. And don't place big bets on one side or another of a lot of the non-monetary crisis possibilities out there, because they are inherently unpredictable.
Now, when it comes to precious metals, I wanted to ask you, what do you think happened around the $3,500 level for gold? It seems like there really wasn't much resistance all the way up there, but now we're seeing a little bit of resistance here. And clients are asking me, what's going on here? Do you anticipate prices continue to rise from here, or do we have a further pullback ahead? Your take on the current state of the gold market?
Well, yeah, you really would have thought $3,000 an ounce would have been resistance, right? Because that's such a big round number that you would have expected a lot of sell orders to cluster right there. And that every time the price touched $3,000 an ounce, those sell orders would have kicked in and knocked it back down. And we would have had like 2 years of bouncing off 3,000 before we broke through. Didn't happen. We blew right through it. And part of that is probably because there's some non-price sensitive buyers out there. The world's central banks, whether it's the BRICS for their future gold-backed currency, or banks in general because of the Basel III regulations coming in, where gold is now a tier 1 asset, so banks need to own gold. And so I think they were just buying without a lot of price sensitivity. Then we finally got to 3,400 or so, and that turned out to be a place where there was a lot of resistance. A lot of selling came in at that point, and gold fell by a couple of $100 an ounce. It's up again today, but it wouldn't be a surprise at all for consolidation to happen here, just technically, not looking at the rest of the unprecedented things that are going on in the world. When something has a nice run like this, it creates a lot of profits that people can take. And so they protect their gains by selling a little bit and everything. And that causes a choppy market for a while. And it wouldn't be a surprise if that was the case for gold, where we go the rest of the year bouncing between 3,000 and 3,400. And you know what? That would be fine for the mining industry, because $3,000 an ounce gold is super profitable for the big, well-run miners. And if that's the way it works out, then you definitely want to be owning the mining stocks, because they're going to be reporting another couple of quarters of phenomenally good cash flow and earnings and revenue and everything. And probably they'll be attracting generalist money because of that. So, a choppy gold market would be just fine for now. The scary part for precious metals investing is that we get a serious correction, which, in bull markets, you get those. So in a normal bull market, you can see gold to go down to $2,500 an ounce and still be in a healthy bull market. And if that happens, then that'll be painful for a lot of people and, a lot of investors in mining stocks and a lot of stackers. But, we shall keep in mind that bull markets have corrections that shake out the weak hands. And in gold's case and also silver's case, the long-term trends are really positive, because we're screwing up the big currencies of the world, and we can't do anything to fix that in the short run. So that means declining currency values, rising inflation probably, and that's a good environment for precious metals. So even if there's a big correction in the short run. Oh, and another thing that could cause a precious metals correction is an equities bear market and a recession, which those things are possible too. Equities are wildly overvalued. We haven't had a real recession since 2008 or 2009. So that it's time, just in the normal course of events, for us to have a couple of years in which the global economy shrinks and equities enter a bear market. That could pull down gold and silver too. So there are reasons for caution in precious metals, short term and maybe intermediate term. But in the long run, this is still a bull market that has a lot further to run. So, buy the dip is a very reasonable approach to precious metals. When you're thinking maybe the end point of this process is $10,000 an ounce gold, then a drop from 3,000 to 2,700 is a signal for you to just buy a little more. Keep on with the dollar cost averaging in both physical gold and silver and in the best miners, the miners that you want to hold for the long haul. And then don't really stress too much about all of this stuff, because so much of what's going on is unknown. But one thing that is reasonably knowable is that we're screwing up the world's currencies, and that's great for precious metals.
Now, when it comes to the mining sector, you mentioned how $3,000 an ounce is very profitable for them. We're seeing interesting mergers and acquisitions happening. Can you tell us a bit about this? I know you've been reporting quite a bit on that on your Substack.
Yeah, what happens in a precious metals bull market is that the big well-run miners and a lot of the well-run junior miners, the producers, in other words, make more money. And they see their earnings go up, they see their cash flow expand, and they do things with that money. They raise their dividends, they buy back their own stock, they pay off debt, and then they go out and make accretive acquisitions. They buy other companies that can help them in some way. And if you're a big miner, chances are, in this kind of an environment, you're producing more than you're finding. In other words, your reserves are shrinking over time. So you need to go out and buy some reserves by acquiring companies that have already found enough gold and silver in the ground to move the needle for you. So M&A, mergers and acquisition activity, starts to ramp up. And we're seeing that now. We're in a fairly early stage of this process. But just lately, Pan American Silver bought Mag Silver for a couple of $2 billion, which is a nice bolt-on kind of acquisition there. Pan American gains a big high-quality mine, and presumably their cash flow goes up more than enough to pay off that $2 billion purchase price. At the other end of the spectrum, I'm not sure what this means, but Dolly Varden, which is a promising exploration company, not even a producer yet, they have property next to Hecla's property in the Golden Triangle in British Columbia. And the thinking was that Hecla would come in and buy them out at some point and then make a district scale mine out of all of that land. But instead, Dolly Varden bought out Hecla, and they've bought a couple of other properties in basically the same period of time. So what they're going for is district scale, but they're doing it by rolling up other properties, starting small and getting big by acquiring other properties. So that's interesting too. That's unexpected. I thought Dolly Varden would be a takeout candidate this year sometime, but instead they're kind of the acquirer now in a lot of cases. And so we'll see how that plays out. I think it means that they're bigger and more valuable, but it's going to take longer to explore the massive land package they have before they come out with a resource that defines just how big and how valuable they are. So I think the time frame got longer, but the upside got higher with those guys. So anyhow, stuff like that is happening in the mining industry now. And that means that, as an investor, you've got interesting choices because the big guys are reporting really nice quarterly earnings. The fourth quarter and the first quarter so far have been big increases year over year. And there's no reason to think the next couple of quarters won't be the same way. And that's going to attract generalist money. Like if you're not a mining investor, but you hear good things about gold and silver and you go to your financial planner and say, give me some gold stocks or whatever, they'll buy the big names. And so those companies tend to go up first in this kind of a bull market. And the fact that they're reporting really good quarterly comparisons helps a lot because that attracts a lot of generalist money. So you can buy those guys and then do quite well without a lot of risk. Or you can go further down the food chain and look for those acquisition candidates like Mag Silver. Mag was bought out for 20% over the low of 2 weeks prior. So not a massive premium, but still a nice little pop, a nice thing to have happen. And there are a lot of mags out there in the precious metal junior producer space that could be taken out in the same way. So maybe you want to look for them. So there are a lot of interesting possibilities out there in this kind of a market. And I think, the important thing is to be involved with high quality names. And then beyond that, just kind of do what feels comfortable. If you're not risk tolerant, go with the big guys. If you're a speculator at heart, go with the little ones. But always, always look for quality. You want the best of breed or whatever you're buying. And that limits your risk. And because, especially with the smaller precious metals companies, most of them will never amount to anything. They'll just cease to exist at some point. So you want the 10% that are going to not just continue to exist, but grow dramatically, be taken out for massive premiums, whatever. So you got to go for quality, and you got to put the time and effort into being able to separate the wheat from the chaff in this space. Otherwise, just go with big ETFs or big miners, and then let somebody else do the legwork and the analysis.
I did want to touch on kind of getting back to the economic situation and also a lot of the uncertainty in the world right now, not just because of Trump, but as you mentioned, because of the fundamental situation we have with debt and how this debt can't be paid off and how there's been so much currency creation over the years that it seems like a reset is inevitable, right? But another wild card that has come up over the last couple of years is artificial intelligence. And especially you've been reporting on artificial general intelligence, which actually seems to learn things along the way and can kind of improve itself, which is kind of a scary thought. So your perspective on AI or AGI and how that might be a wild card in all of this.
Yeah, AI that's able to learn and grow and improve itself on its own. In other words, rewrite its code with potentially unlimited growth. There's no reason why something that's as smart as a human and creative as a human can't be 100 times smarter than a human in 2 years, and then 100 times smarter than, there's no limit theoretically to what we're creating here. So, but there is a point in the presumably not too distant future when somebody develops AGI, artificial general intelligence, which is, an AI that's able to create and think and adapt to new situations and learn and grow. When somebody gets that, they potentially become the ruler of the world, because in theory, an AGI can improve itself to the point where it can break any encryption. It can invade any bank account. It can get into government databases, including the nuclear launch code side of the government's database. They can do pretty much anything they want, and there's not anything anybody else can do to stop them. So you really want somebody trustworthy to come up with that first. And, there's no way to know who's going to come up with it first. And the idea of, let's say China, for instance, coming up with it before the US does, or somebody else in the West, is very scary from the point of view of the democratic capitalist systems in the US and Europe and Asia. You don't want a potentially dangerous dictatorship to have that kind of power. But then, of course, what would the US become if we had that kind of power? So we might be entering a phase of history where somebody gains game-changing power via AGI and then uses that either for good or for ill. And nobody's in a position to really do much about that, because we're in an arms race right now. It's not like we're out there trying to control artificial intelligence. For a little while, there was this idea that we would have restrictions on various aspects of the research and what what these things are capable of doing. But then we switch gears to basically an arms race where everybody's trying to be first across that line. And that could make 2028 a very different year. Things could happen that are almost incomprehensible now, and are uncontrollable, where they happen because they're happening, and there's not much we can do about it. So the world could change in a really dramatic way that goes way beyond, what kind of deal we cut with Iran, or whether the stock market goes up or down by 30%, or whether we have the currency reset this year or 5 years from now. Those are all big things. Those are historically important things. But the emergence of sentient artificial intelligence would be orders of magnitude bigger than that. And, I have absolutely no idea how that progresses and when it happens. But if it does happen, it's basically bigger than anything that has ever happened in our lifetimes, by orders of magnitude. It's just... it's something that, they call it the singularity. Beyond the point of the singularity, history doesn't matter anymore. There's no way to predict the future by looking at the past, and we would enter that kind of a singularity.
Do you anticipate that could impact the economic situation at all? Because I see definitely a scary situation, right, where the AI takes over or whatever, or the AGI takes over. But in another sense, there seems to be possibly very positive outcomes to AI and how it could grow the economy. And do you think we could actually grow our way out of the debt or out of this currency crisis, or is that already, in your sense, as you've mentioned, kind of in your mind, kind of just baked in the cake, and there's no way out of it?
Well, a good AI, a super powerful AI, could solve a lot of problems, and that would be what we would have to hope for. Elon Musk talks about this a lot, but you need to design an AI with its own, instead of just letting it develop its own volition, figure out what's good for it and then go from there. You build that into it, that human flourishing is the ultimate good. And if it's possible for that to be done, and then, a sentient AI emerges, but because of the way it was created, it wants to help us instead of just wipe us out because we're consuming too many resources, then all of a sudden you'd have, kind of a benevolent God, which might be a really good thing. I don't know. We're into the singularity part of the process now, where it's really impossible to predict the future based on anything we've ever learned in our lifetimes. But yeah, it's possible that AI is a positive force in the world and solves a lot of our problems. And the solving the financial problem because we've borrowed too much money, I'm not sure how you use artificial intelligence to make the math work, because being very smart doesn't invalidate the laws of mathematics. So we would still have to have some kind of a currency reset, but it could cushion the blow by creating enough new wealth that devaluing the dollar by 70%, to go back on the gold standard, doesn't impoverish 50% of the population. If we could figure out a way to increase the amount of wealth in the world at the same time we're doing a currency reset, then it would be a non-event. So yes, it's conceivable, but it's one of those things that we can talk about it in general terms, but almost nobody has any kind of a technical sense of how it would happen. So it's almost in the realm of magical thinking right now, that wouldn't it be great if, but there's no way to know how it would happen. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on out there that is unique in human history. And because of that, it's hard to focus on the unique stuff and easy to focus on the stuff we understand. And that's kind of how I approach things. The next couple of years will be like human history, and therefore the past is prologue in some way, and we can derive predictions from it. But I think you get further out than that, and things start changing in ways that are inherently unpredictable.
It seems like when we have something that's unpredictable, I like to think of no-lose situations or no-lose decisions, right? So we've talked about preparedness in the past. I mean, with precious metals, obviously, they can fall, but in some sense, it's a no-lose situation because it can't go to zero, right? And it's been money throughout human history. So that's one thing that seems to me a pretty safe bet. And then also when we look at other forms of preparedness that we've talked about before, like building community, or gardening, learning a little bit about farming and all of that, learning how to do things more on your own. I think those are things where we build skills, and we just there's no lose to that. If the economy is fine for the next 50 years, then still that's a benefit to us. So I think it's important in this uncertain time to kind of think of those different options that we can become a little bit more independent, learn a bit more, prepare a bit more, and build community and all that. Protect our finances. Another area that you've touched on recently as well, and we've talked a little bit about on this channel, is health, right? You can't lose by improving your health. And there's this interesting thing that seems kind of to be all over the internet now, seed oils, right? And you talked about this as well, how a lot of these processed oils that are in almost all foods nowadays could potentially be very harmful. Your perspective on that, and maybe some ways in which people might be able to just make small little changes to their diet to improve their health, and that's always good for preparedness.
Yeah, you are absolutely right that the way we should behave going forward is the way we should have always behaved, but we didn't have to because life was so cushy and everything. And we really should be skill stacking. We should be able to manage our lives without having to call in experts all the time. We should be, I have a series in Substack called Health Prepping, based on the premise that, you can have all the gold and silver stacked if you want to, and everything else is taken care of. But if you're not healthy, if you're very sick, then none of those other things will save you and give you a good life. So you've got to be healthy. And there are lots of ways to do that the health establishment doesn't tell us about. Or it's starting to. Kennedy is starting to look into a lot of things that the people in charge for the past 30 or 40 years didn't bother with, because solving those problems would not be profitable for them. And you mentioned seed oils. Yeah, those are a class of really highly processed oils that in the process of being processed become really unhealthy. But it also makes them super cheap, so they become components in processed foods, which make the processed foods profitable, but make the people who eat those foods unhealthy on a industrial scale. The U.S. is one of the most unhealthy societies that's ever existed. And the reason for that is because we've developed a system where the food companies make us sick by selling us poison, and then the pharmaceutical companies come in with expensive drugs to treat the symptoms of those chronic illnesses, and it just goes round and round until we get cancer towards the end, and they hit us with very expensive cancer treatments that don't fix anything, and then we die. And they rack up hundreds of billions of dollars of profits throughout this process. And the information is out there. You can read up on seed oils and then just stop eating those things. Don't eat anything that has, sunflower oil in it, because it's probably been processed to the point where it's dangerous. And there's so many other things like that. There's a whole new branch of mental health now called metabolic psychiatry, where instead of going to a shrink and then they hand you Prozac on the way out or whatever, and you treat the symptoms of your depression or your bipolar disease or whatever, a metabolic shrink will look at your diet and look at your exercise habits, and basically they become a life coach, and they show you how to use lifestyle tweaks to cure your depression or whatever. And that's things like that have always been around, but they didn't used to call it metabolic psychiatry. So now it's got the patina of an establishment field, And that's cool, because that's the kind of thing that actually does fix people's lives. For instance, exercise does just as much good as Prozac for depression. And you can look at any kind of other psychoactive drug, and there's a lifestyle fix that does as much good or more than those drugs for you without any of the side effects. So, yeah, there's so many things we can do to be healthier than we are right now. And that should be priority one, because none of the other stuff matters if you're sick. And I think a lot of people have to get sick to realize that. The old saying, if you've got your health, you've got everything. You don't really understand that until you lose your health. And just hopefully enough people learn that lesson before it's irrevocable that we build a healthy society from here on out. But personally, the things you should be focusing on are things like that you have control over, and that smart people have always done. And it's only in the last generation or two that we stopped thinking that way. And so we should go back to it, So the whole reluctant prepper thing where you come from is the lifestyle of choice going forward right now. And I think more and more people are picking up on that, which is really encouraging.
Certainly. And if our viewers are interested in learning more, they can go to your Substack, rubino.substack.com. You'll see it right if you look down in the description of this video, first thing there. So if our viewers are interested in learning more, go check that out. Can you tell us a bit about your Substack?
Yeah, it's aimed at actionable advice for the things that we talked about today, investing advice and some lifestyle stuff, although I'm not an expert on a lot of those subjects. Mostly I pull in articles from people who are experts. But so far, so good. It's an interesting community that's growing around that newsletter, and I'm having fun running it.
Well, John, thank you so much for your time today, and God bless.
Thanks, Elijah. Talk soon.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for May 12th through May 19th, 2025, while supplies last. First this week, we feature backdated 1-ounce gold American Eagles at just $89.99 over spot per ounce. 1-ounce 2025 silver American Eagles are just $4.99 over spot. Next, we have 10-ounce silver Royal Mint coins at just $2.99 over spot per ounce. The 10-ounce Britannia, 10-ounce Royal Arms, 10-ounce Little John, and 10-ounce Merlin are all 4.9s fine. And we have a very limited quantity. Again, they're just $2.99 over spot per ounce while supplies last. Next, backdated 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are only $69.99 over spot. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.